And so on that Saturday, the wrong day of the week, you see, man wasn't going to see anybody at all and give them spiritual life. He was going to get it all for himself on Saturday and share it Monday. But I didn't have time till Monday. And so, on that Saturday, fully convinced that I had made no progress, and I wasn't any further advanced in the spiritual awareness than I had been 13 years before, on that day of all days, enough light should break through so I could do healing work. And that many of these human traits should fall away from me. In that one day, after 13 years, well, you see, onion skins had been falling away. And in that one day, the realization came. You know how it came to Saul of Tarsus. He too had spent years and years and years studying about God, praying, reading. And to our sense, it would seem that he was doing it in the wrong way, because he was doing it in the Hebrew way. Wasn't anything wrong about that. He was doing it in the perfectly right way. And the proof of it is that in one blinding flash, the full light was given to him. Well, yeah, that wouldn't come if he'd been doing everything wrong all those years. He wasn't. The Hebrew way is all right. Protestant way, Catholic way, the Hindu way, the Mohammedan way. Any way is all right if the desire is to know God. And certainly, you know, that was Saul's desire. He was even willing to kill for his idea of God. And when we ourselves are willing to sacrifice our lives, or our money, or our time, or our effort, for our concept of God, we will someday lose that concept of God and find the one true God. That's all that happened to Saul. In that blinding flash, he lost the Hebrew concept of God. And he gained the vision of God, the experience of God, which is even better than a Hebrew concept or a Christian concept or any other concept. Because a concept is only a concept, it's never God. And all of these concepts that we follow, Hebrew, Christian, or other, the best they can do for us is to lead us to the place where we realize that none of them were correct. That the only thing that's correct is the experience of God itself. And then when you have the experience of God itself, you will know how foolish you were in believing that your concepts were correct. Let me illustrate that. I'm sure that very, very often you think of God as Jesus did, as Father. Well, now, if you just stop to think a minute, you'll know that that's all wrong. Because what is a father? A male parent? You don't think God is a male parent, do you? You know that God isn't a male parent. And so you say, oh, and I've been thinking of God as Father. Yes. Is that correct? No. No, God is not a male parent. Well, then why did Jesus speak of God as Father? Because to Jesus, God, Father wasn't a male parent. He had already agreed that there are no male parents. So when he said Father, he didn't mean that he had a male parent inside of himself. No. He was thinking of Father in an entirely different way than you and I do. So it is when the Hindu talks about Mother God, you don't think for a minute that a really enlightened soul would think of God as a female parent. No. And so you say, oh, I mustn't say Mother God because all I know of Mother God is a female parent. What do they see? I don't know. I don't know, because God doesn't appear to me as Mother God. But I'm sure that they don't think of it as a female parent. And so when Fox of the Quakers coined the term Father, Mother God, combining the Christian and the Hindu, he wasn't thinking of a combined male and female. And you know he wasn't. You know that he had some inner vision of a spiritual principle that perhaps combined the strength of the male and the tenderness of the female, but merely symbolized Father, Mother, God. And so if you are entertaining a concept of God as Father, Mother, God, you're far from the point unless you too have had a spiritual realization of what Father, Mother means in a spiritual sense. Of course, there are people who know the meaning of Father, Mother in a spiritual sense. For instance, whoever is the author of the first chapter of the book of Genesis knows all about God as Father, Mother, because he calls God the creator of all things and revealed that this creation was complete before it was manifested. He had a vision of the invisible presence and power or activity of law at work. Now then, we today use different terms for God, and they're all right for today. Next year, you'll probably have an entirely different concept of God, and you'll be using a different term. I know in the early stages of many people's experience, they think of God as mind or principle. Later on, they begin to perceive the nature of God as spirit or soul. And then, as you know, to me came the revelation of God as infinite invisible. And so each one in turn comes face to face with God experience as soul did. Now that's when you've risen above the letter of truth into the spirit or consciousness of truth. That is when you have left behind your studies of God, as Saul studied God, and come into the experience of God. That is just identically the same as anybody who knows all that the truth books say about God and prayer and spirit, and then after they have their own first experience, that's all wiped away. And then they begin to phrase it in their own terminology. They begin to write books showing it as it came through to them. But it isn't the last word. It might be the last word for them, but it isn't the last word, because the very moment that you have your God experience, the minute that you are in the position that Saul of Tarsus was in, or any mystic, you then begin to write books showing it forth as the experience appeared to you. Walt Whitman did, Brother Lawrence did, Emerson did, Blake did, was it Francis Thompson of England did. Anybody who has an actual God experience begins all of a sudden to write. If they don't write books, they write poems. And the strange thing about it is, there's a book called the Oxford Book of English Mystical Verse, published by the Oxford Press. And it contains the spiritual, the mystical poetry. Oh, it must have 75, maybe 100 authors, men and women, who attained the actual spiritual experience. And you see what happened? They all began to write poetry. And the strange part is that when you read it, you find that each one had the same experience, that the moment they realized or achieved that God experience, they spoke the word I. One of them goes so far as to say, before God was, I am. Yes, because before ever there was a concept of God on earth, I am. Because there is nothing before I am, and therefore I am eternal. I have existed before birth, and I will exist long after what the world calls death. Before any person on the face of the globe ever even thought of a word like God, or a being like God, I am. And you'll find that in that whole book, that everyone agreed on the same thing. And yet each one told it in a different way. Each one had a different experience. Each one brought forth their revelation in a different unfoldment. But they all agreed on one thing. Before Abraham was, I am. I am from everlasting to everlasting. And now you see that when we say that intellectually, it isn't true. Because intellectually, the I that we know was born on a certain date and seems destined to pass out of this phase at another date. And so you see, it isn't true if intellectually we say, I am that I am, or before Abraham was, I am. Because we're speaking of ourselves now as human beings, as we know ourselves. But the moment that transitional thing takes place, which reveals a spiritual light, you say, oh, that I is eternal. Yes, and I am that I. And then you've joined the group of mystics. Then you've joined the Moses, the Jesus, and all those who realize the true nature of that invisible selfhood, which does not glorify itself in the outer realm, but is only glorified by the effects of itself. In other words, the heavens declare the glory of God. The earth showeth forth his handiwork. And so then, that I which we are in secret now, that I shows itself forth in better health, more ample supply, greater peace of mind, happier human relationships. Not in what the world calls happiness. Don't look for that. You won't find that. That's a state of deadness. But there is a state of peace which is at peace regardless of the outer circumstances or conditions of life. In other words, Jesus could be led to the cross, but you don't think for a moment that he lost his peace or that he thought he was losing his life. Oh no. In the attainment of this inner spiritual vision, he could give up his body without giving up his life. And as he proved, he could even give up his body and then pick it up again. I can lay down my body and I can pick it up. No man can take it from me. Why? Because now I've achieved the realization of God. And who's going to destroy God's work? You don't think for a minute that if God is life eternal that anyone can destroy it. And so if God is infinite life, that's your life and mine. It'll never be destroyed. But saying this to you, and you intellectually agreeing on it, will not do the work for you. But by abiding in it, eventually you'll pass from the letter of truth to the actual experience or demonstration or spiritual discernment of truth. Now, the whole point of this evening, as it flashes through my mind, is this: that in our years of study, we may, at this moment, some of us here, be only agreeing intellectually that these things are true, and then saying, but I can't prove them, or I can't evidence them, or I can't show them forth. I can't even feel them. That's all right. Everyone has gone through that phase, not for a year or 2 or 3. Some have merely gone through it 1 or 2 or 3 or 7 or 8. But there's any reason to believe that there aren't people who haven't gone through it for 30 years. And you say, what? Possibility of looking forward to that? Yes, there is that possibility, but you might as well be prepared for it and say, I've got to keep going, because where am I going to go if I stop? I've got nothing to go back to. So even if it does take 30 or 40 years, I might as well stay on the path until it breaks, because if you stick to the correct letter of truth, you will attain the spiritual wisdom. And even if you are following a teaching that is not so correct, in its statement of truth, and your motive and desire for God is as pure as that of Saul of Tarsus, you also will arrive. It doesn't mean that just the correct letter of truth is going to get you into heaven. No, it's a marvelous thing not to be filled with a lot of the errors that do exist in many teachings, but there's enough light in any of those teachings for an individual who is not concerned about whether he's an infinite way student or a Christian Scientist, a unity or a divine science, but who says, I don't care what you call me, my motive is in finding God. My desire is to find God, not to glorify divine science or Christian science or unity or the infinite way. I don't care about them. What I care about is me and my relationship to God and the attainment of it. And so, if I'm following the infinite way teachings, or the divine science, or the Christian science, or the unity, and not thinking of them as some kind of a glorified something or other, but thinking of them merely as a means toward bringing me to the light of revelation, then any one of them will suffice. There is enough truth in any of them to lead a person to the kingdom of God. It won't be that way if you take those teachings and just look on them as some kind of a God itself, or something infallible, or that you must follow its rules and regulations. Oh, no. No. If you are to benefit from them, you must look on them as steps, as help, as aids toward your realization of God. Then you'll attain it. And you'll attain it in any one of them. There's enough truth in any of them to lead you right to the kingdom of God, if your motive is to achieve the realization of God and not just be thought to be some kind of a loyal follower of something or somebody. Don't do it. Certainly, you know in this work that we don't ask such things or demand it, firstly because I don't want any personal followers, and I'm sure that those who get anywhere in this work will never want personal followers. Only one thing that any of us have a right to want, and that is if God has given us any grace at all, that we can share it with you so that you can find God. You want to find God and join a Catholic convent? God bless you. Go ahead and do it. As long as you find God where you are, it makes no difference. Now, you can find God through the study of the letter combined with meditation, prayer, and a very humble desire to know God, whom to know aright is life eternal. Please believe me, you will not ever gain life eternal just by following a religious teaching, any religious teaching. You will only gain life eternal by knowing Him aright. And believe me, there have been Catholic mystics who knew Him aright, and Protestant ones, and Christian Science ones, and Unity ones, and New Thought ones. All you have to do is be concerned with knowing God aright and staying with it through the trials and the tribulations until those onion skins fall off, enough of them, to bring you to the spiritual experience of knowing God. Now, when that experience takes place, first of all, it will show itself forth in this way. You will lose all anxiety, all concern, and all fear for yourself. That's the first thing that happens. You know that alive or well, sick or well, alive or dead, you're just the same infinite spiritual being that you are now. And so you won't be too concerned whether you're a little sick or a little well, or a little dead or a little alive. Whether you live in one state or another, or whether you live on one plane of consciousness or another, won't disturb you. That is the first thing that happens. Care drops away. Responsibility drops away. And then instead of having to support yourself with physical or mental means, your support begins to flow without taking thought for your life. Then instead of establishing health by a lot of thought-taking processes and knowing the truth processes, all of that drops away. and your health is taken care of as if there really were a God who cared. Because by that time, you come into the actual experience of God caring. Now, two things happen at this point. Both of them, you have to watch yourself, not let them happen. At least not let them get too big a hold on you. One is you begin to be concerned for your family, who don't know this truth. And you want to drag them right into heaven with you. And you better get over that complex very quickly, or they're going to drag you out into their level. You're never going to take them up, I can tell you that. They can drag you down, but you're never going to get them up. So you might as well let them work out their own salvation, and if they're to come up, they'll come up, either through grace or through difficulties, the same as you did. But trying to save them their difficulties and take them up the easy way, no, it's more apt that they'll take you down than if you take them up. But then the second great worry is you want to give it to the world. Oh, if the world had this. Somebody writes me, oh, come over to England, they need this. And somebody writes, oh, come to Africa, they need this. And I say, brother, if there's any spot on the globe that needs it more than the United States of America, and more particularly Washington, D.C., I would like to hear about it. Oh, it's needed. Oh, yes, that's right. There is one place where it's needed even more than that. Me. I need it even more than they do. And so do you. You'll be surprised how much we need it. Because no matter how much we've seen of it, we've only glimpsed it. That's all. There isn't anyone here that has done more than glimpse it. As far as I know, there's anybody on earth who has more than glimpsed it. It's true, some are showing it forth in greater degree than others, have glimpsed it to a greater degree than others. But since I'm in this work, I've had the joy, the pleasure of meeting quite a few illumined mystics and souls. And they all tell me the same thing. They're so regretful, so sorry that they have so little to offer because they've only glimpsed so little. And it's true. It's not false modesty. In comparison to what God is, we have just glimpsed the possibilities, the potentialities of the vision. And so let us not get all puffed up with the idea now that we have something with which to save the world, because we haven't. Nobody is going to save the world. It has been my experience that I cannot even save one individual. And I can truthfully say that in 25 years of my work, I don't know of one single soul that I have saved. Not one. I have seen some people, through this unfoldment, come to their own realization and demonstration of God. But they did it. They were longing for it. They were looking for it. They were exposing themselves to it. And then with a little glimpse that pops out for me once in a while, they're helped. But I didn't do it. They did it. We can't save the world. We can't save an individual. All that we can do is bring about our own delivery from bondage to human sin. Then when we have achieved it, those who are open, receptive, and responsive can come and receive a bit of the light that is shining through it. That's all. But they themselves must claim it for their own and demonstrate it. And so don't permit yourselves to get fed up with the idea, now you've had this light, now you're going out and save the world, or your relatives, or your friends. Keep your spiritual light secret. Keep it sacred. If others discern it, share it with them to the extent of their capacity to receive. But otherwise, keep it secret. Keep it sacred. You may say, are we doing that? Or am I doing that? Yes. Yes, I am. Since this work began, I have never gone any place until I was sent for. I have never gone any place until I was invited. And in most of the cases, I have had lots and lots of invitations before I even went once. I'm still following that plan. I'm not advertising. I'm not putting this in newspapers. I'm not writing it for magazines. I'm not trying to save the world. I'm not going anywhere to carry the gospel. When I lived in California, I stayed in California. When I was invited somewhere, if the invitation seemed sincere, I answered it and went. Now I live in Hawaii, I stay there. When the invitations come and the inner guidance says, yes, go, I go. And so it is that I do not go out to save the world. I stay home and I live my own conscious realization of God. And then when an individual comes over to Hawaii, I share it with them. Or if a group comes, I share it with them. Or if a group invites me to give a lecture or a class, I do it. In just the same way that I came to Chicago this trip without any intention or without any program of trying to save you or carry you to heaven or heal you. I was perfectly satisfied to stay in the hotel until it was time to catch my 6 o'clock plane tomorrow night. But this evening was arranged without me and not for me, and because I was here and invited, it was my joy to come and share this with you. But you can see the difference between doing that and coming here with any idea of selling you the infinite way. No, you came here to buy it or get it or something else. I didn't come here to sell it or give it. You see the difference? That's the way it is in all of our lives. I don't offer it to my brother, I don't offer it to my sister, because they have not reached out for it, they haven't asked for it, they haven't desired it. Once in a while they need a healing and they'll ask for that, and they get it. But that's as much as they want, that's as much as they get, as far as I'm concerned. When either one of them says, now I'm ready, I want it, I'll be ready too to share it. Not 1 minute before. So whether it's my brother or my sister, or whether it's you, or whether it's all the you that are out in the world, it isn't my function to save you. It isn't my function to convert you to God. It isn't my function to mind your business. It's my function to mind my business. To go away for 40 days or 400 days and live my communion with God. And then, if by chance you say, give me some of that meat, give me some of that drink, give me some of that wine, that water, give me some of that spiritual food, you'll find that I respond to that call. And I share the light with you insofar as I have received it. And I say frankly to you that from there on you have to take it. Work with it, even if at first it's on the intellectual plane, until the time comes when it passes transitionally from an intellectual agreement to a spiritual experience. Now, when your spiritual experience comes, you will find that it will not be long after until you are called upon for healings or for instruction or for guidance. And then it will be your function to answer. Not go and see my practitioner, no. But since the call is made upon me, God's grace must give me the wisdom and the healing power to respond to it. You see that? It isn't a question of saying, oh, here's a book, you ought to go and see my teacher. No. It is a question that when the call is made upon you, that you must understand that God's grace is your sufficiency, and then respond. Because whatever call is made upon you, you will be able to respond to. There'll be nothing greater than your capacity. The deeper things will still go to those more qualified. Because the more you have, the more will be expected of you. That's always the way. So do not hesitate. If someone calls you tomorrow and says, I'm not feeling well, can you give me some help? Don't run and say, no, I'll get you my book or give you my practitioner's telephone number. Don't do it. Say, yes, I will give you help. The grace of God that sent this call to me will meet this call. I of my own self do not know enough to heal a headache, but the grace of God that brought you to me will also perform the work that is given me to do. He performeth that which is given me to do. He perfecteth that which concerneth me. And so if you're called upon to heal or to teach, if you realize immediately that you don't know enough for that, but that the grace of God that gave you the call will give you the answer, you will perform it well. If you make the mistake of saying, oh, I have a good understanding, oh, I have enough understanding to begin to teach, you'll find that you'll make shipwreck of your experience, because the truth is, you never will have that much understanding. You never will have enough understanding to heal. You never will have enough understanding to teach. In fact, you'll never even be good enough. You can't get that good. Not even Jesus could. Why callest thou me good? There is but one good, the Father in heaven. Why callest thou me spiritual? There is but one Spirit, the Father within. Why callest thou me a practitioner or a teacher or a master? There is but one master, the Father within me, the Son of God within me. And so, as you continuously realize, not with false modesty, but with a clear understanding that whatever spiritual grace you have is the grace of God, then you can never fail. You can heal, you can teach, you can lead them to truth. Only through the realization that the grace of God that brought the call to you is the grace of God that answers the call to you. Then as you sit quietly in the silence, God will speak in some unmistakable way, not necessarily words or thoughts, but the activity of God will make itself evident and the result will follow. Now you see why you may at many times have tried to heal and not succeeded, even though you knew the truth. It was because it was at that time only an intellectual knowledge of truth. And it won't work, because the intellectual knowledge of truth is a stepping stone. It's one of the means by which we achieve the spiritual realization of it. I was asked recently about the founding of a university to teach practitioners and teachers. And I smiled. How long a course would you recommend? And how many hours a day? And how many days a week? As you better not answer, because I'm going to tell you that I will only consider it if you're willing to make the course 5 to 7 years and insist that the students live there 7 days a week without vacation for 5 years and give me 24 hours a day of their lives. Do not go home and have no obligations of any kind. I'll be glad to undertake it. Why? Because I have found that if I have a student 3 to 5 years, some 6 years, and I have them enough days a week and enough hours in the day, they finally develop. They finally develop into the spiritual vision. I've never yet succeeded with any student under that, although I have seen students who became practitioners in 24 hours. Well, that wasn't through me. That was through their own inner development. The minute they turned to God, to the Christ, their soul opened and they evolved. And they began healing at once. That had nothing to do with me. That wasn't my teaching. That was their soul development. I have seen other people not only in the Infinite Way, but before that in Christian Science, who with 6, 8, 9 months of work became practitioners, and very good ones. But that wasn't because of the teacher. That was because of their own readiness, their own development. Without that, you can be assured of this, that to turn out an individual, or for you or for me to turn out into capable practitioners, I mean public workers in the ministry, requires years of devotion to one thing. Not the desire to heal, that will defeat the purpose. Not the desire to teach, that will defeat the purpose. The desire must be only to attain the God experience. Then, the moment the God experience comes, the teaching and the healing follow. And so it is, I wouldn't even be identified with a school that was identifying itself as practitioners or teachers. Frankly, I won't ever identify myself with a school, period. But that's the reason for it. The reason is that my inner unfoldment has revealed to me that the secret of life is attain that mind that was in Christ Jesus. Attain some measure of it anyhow. Attain the realization of God. Attain the God experience. Attain a conscious communion with God. Attain the ability to live and move and have your being in God. Attain the ability to throw one's whole dependence on the infinite invisible instead of on any person or circumstance in the outer. And so when a person undertakes to study with me, with that object, and has no thought in their mind of using it for a public ministry or to be a practitioner, then I can work with them. Then I can step by step lead them to that experience, and then after that they can go out into the ministry if they like, or they, as some have, can retire back into the country and never be seen of men again. They just go back and live their communion with God on the inner plane, and whatever work they do for the world is done on the inner plane. They do a lot of good, because these miracles that you're witnessing in the world today, and which you're going to witness in the next few years, like world peace on earth, and the utilization of atomic power for your automobile and airplane and so forth, all of those things are the result, the direct result of mystics' communion, conscious communion with God, bringing God into the visible world and appearing as these modern wonders, some of which we so badly misuse. But even the desire to misuse them will disappear, as it is disappearing. More and more, there is less and less desire to use the atomic bomb or the hydrogen bomb. There is less swaggering nationally and internationally with that bomb. There is more and more a willingness to conciliate, and that's not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of spiritual strength. When you're willing to forego the weapons of the world, it is only because you have a greater dependence on the invisible weapon, the Word of God, the sword of the Spirit. Just as you individually are ready to give up more and more of your medicines and surgeries, you will find yourself with a greater reliance on the infinite invisible, and will in that proportion show forth greater health and harmony without the outer aids. No one can say to you, you mustn't use medicine or you mustn't have surgery, because no one can make your demonstration for you. That is your individual experience. In proportion as you receive spiritual light, you will depend less on medicines, less on personal advertising, less on outer physical or mental activity. And you relax more and more and more in an invisible spiritual presence and power. So it is that as you attain more and more of spiritual life, you will depend less and less on legal processes. You won't have to go to court as much as you formerly did, and eventually you'll be able to get along without courts, because you'll find that whatever legal problems come to you will be solved. Oh, you may go to court to have it legalized or to have it made official, but you won't go to court to fight for your rights or to fight for your dues or to fight what's coming to you, because you'll find that more and more it'll be offered to you, free willing, free grace, without fighting. As the God experience comes into your life, the spiritual power accompanies it, governing your whole experience. Do not then be discouraged in the years of your study when you are attaining an intellectual knowledge of truth. Also remember that the ways you have followed may not always be the ways even of intellectual truth. There may be lots of error in them. For instance, I illustrated that before. If any of you have ever followed the path of demonstrating supply or demonstrating home or demonstrating companionship, you have delayed your entrance into heaven, not purposely, but because you were erroneously taught. It was once believed that you could demonstrate supply. You can't. The movements that taught that have shrunk. They're almost invisible in England and here too, because they never succeeded in demonstrating supply. You can demonstrate a realization of God and have all the supply that you will ever want. You can't demonstrate companionship. You'll be surprised at how many letters go back out of my office, sometimes with money in them. My secretary has a good laugh. I receive letters like, please do some work for me for health, for wealth, and for a husband. Enclosed, please find $2 or $5 love offering. And I write back, I'm sorry, but I don't know how to get your health and wealth and a husband for $5. I don't even know how to get it for $50. And then we put a paragraph down there. If, however, you ever feel that you would like to know God, like to experience God, write me, and I'll be happy to help you. And one of these days, when you have that experience, you'll probably find you've got your health and your wealth and your marriage too. You see what I mean? You can't do it. You can't answer those letters. Oh yes, I'll take up work for you to get a husband. You may succeed. And then just think of the blame that happens afterward when he doesn't turn out right. Yes, you may demonstrate money for somebody, and then have some parent write you and say, why did you do that? He got in trouble with it. No. When you demonstrate the grace of God for a person, then the money that comes and the marriage that comes and the position that comes, they prove to be, well, the result of a spiritual unfoldment, and they're harmonious, and they're joyous, and they're progressively good. So it is with all of us. Let us, in the infinite way, forget about demonstrating anything other than a realization of God. Let us pray that we have an experience like Saul of Tarsus. You know, there is no literature at the present moment to tell us how or when Jesus achieved his spiritual realization. There will be, in the next few years, there will be a book revealing the whole story of how and when he came to his spiritual illumination, because the manuscripts now have been found with the whole story of his life. But we do know the story of Saul. We don't even know the story of John. We don't know how John, of the Gospel of John, attained his spiritual light, except that he says he attained it or received it direct from Jesus Christ. But it isn't likely that he received it while Jesus was on earth. He received it in inner illumination. But you see, the minute he received it, he was able to write a book about it. Before that, we haven't any record that he wrote books. So it is, attain some measure of that mind which was in Christ Jesus. Attain a God experience. Attain the ability to consciously commune inside with God. Talk to no man about it, but find yourself a teacher with whom you can speak or with whom you can write, who can guide you, more especially one who can meditate with you. If you find a person, a teacher, who has attained some measure of ability to meditate, I mean fruitfully, bring forth fruit, then meditate with that person. You don't need instruction in the letter of truth. You can find all of that in the Bible and certainly in the Infinite Way writings. But if you can have somebody who has attained the ability to touch the inner kingdom in their meditation, they can open your spiritual center so that you too will be able to read no longer with the intellectual mind, but with your spiritual consciousness. You'll then be reading with the heart instead of with the brain, or reading with the soul instead of with the brain. And so it is that in our work we give most of our time and attention in teaching to the meditation work. And whenever and wherever we have someone who has attained the ability to meditate and bring forth spiritual fruitage and harmony, then we encourage that one to do meditating with the students and help them to open their soul, their consciousness, so that they in turn may be able to not only read books correctly, but eventually to write them. Well, I think that I probably have more justification now for making that plain tomorrow. And I'm grateful that on such few minutes' notice so many of you got here. I'm grateful for this opportunity of sharing with you. And I'll say aloha, which means hello and goodbye, until we meet again, because this is a 6-month trip. I might, in closing, say this to you, that just as you turn to a practitioner or teacher for meditation and communion, expecting it to bless you and release you from some of the burdens of the world, in the same way, those of us who are engaged in this work will appreciate your giving a few minutes every day to a conscious meditation or communion with the idea of realizing that the same Spirit that raised up Jesus Christ from the dead is upholding Lorraine, or upholding Valborg, or upholding me in my travels, or upholding those who are engaged in the Infinite Way work. If it is possible for one individual to pray and benefit another, then it is possible for another to benefit the one. And so it is that the Master asked the disciples to pray with him in the Garden of Gethsemane. He begged them to stay awake with him 1 hour, pray, meditate, hold up his hand. And so I say to every student of the Infinite Way, give me once in a while a minute or 2 or 5 of your time for conscious communion with God and the realization that God goes with me and is with me and is me, because God is functioning as the Infinite Way and upholding its messengers. The words are meaningless. We could write those words and read them every day. But it isn't that. It's realization of that. And as you have a conscious realization of that, it acts the same way as a treatment, a prayer, or communion. In my experience, in the experience of all our workers, we have no organization, as you know, but we have a staff of workers. Otherwise, there would be no monthly letter. There would be no tape recordings. There would be no published writings. There would be no correspondence. And I don't mind telling you that our correspondence at the present time is 4,000 letters per month plus. And so, you know, we have a staff. And just as we, every day, meditate and enter communion for the purpose of realizing that our teachers and our staff workers and our students are forever held in the bosom of the Father, so may the students do for us. Thank you. Aloha until we meet again.